So far in this series, I've presented a structure and a framework for looking at our past. I've also presented my thesis and my idea for the point that we've reached in the present. I've presented a fraction, a small glimpse of a vision of the future. And in the next videos, I'm going to expand on that vision and also present to you my particular plan of action that I've chosen for myself based on my understanding of that past, present, and future. Now, if you've followed this whole series, and if you agree with the description and thesis that I've laid out, then of course, the most important question that you're asking right now is, how can I take some actions? How can I benefit from the coming change? What are the things that I can do? That is something that you are going to have to decide for yourself. I'm going to present you some of my ideas and what I've come up with. But again, these are plans for me. And they might also work for you. But I would wager that there are aspects of your life that I'm not aware of and that are not aspects of my life that will play a major part in your own personal evolution. There's no reason to scrap the concepts and ideas that you've learned as you've walked through your life. So I'll say again, there are as many ways to benefit from this coming change as there are people on the planet. I also want you to think about it this way. If you're over the age of about 30, you've experienced kind of an analogous shift already in human consciousness. I'm old enough to remember a time before anybody was on the internet. As a teenage hacker in the mid-90s, I remember trying to express to people how cool this new thing called the internet was. Of course, at that time, it was just dial-up speed. But I could see the potential. And the internet is really a concept. It isn't the machines. It isn't the fiber optic backbone network. It's a series of protocols, a series of languages that allow those machines to all communicate with one another in a standardized way, such that you could right now remove all of the hardware from the entire internet, and given enough time and man hours, you could reconstitute the internet again. Because those protocols and the concepts behind them is what really matters. And so imagine yourself in, say, 1993, having a good grasp of what the internet was. And imagine yourself trying to figure out how you could benefit from it. Well, think of how many different and grand experiments there have been. Some have been wildly successful. Some have been flops. Some have started out in one form. For instance, Twitter was once a mass text messaging system. That's what it was when I got on. There were no smartphones and there were no apps. And look at it, think how unwieldy it would be now if every single one of the people that you follow, every time they tweeted, it showed up on your phone. As a matter of fact, that's why Twitter is only 140 characters, because that's how many is in an SMS message. So there are as many possibilities as there are people. This is a wonderful and fun opportunity. The world that's coming. So, before we talk about the world that's coming, let's talk about the world that we're in. In order to get a really great vision of what we're moving into, we need to understand the situation that we find ourselves in. As we discussed before, We are at the height of the Vaishya or merchant age, which means that all of us, almost 100%, in order to survive, have to participate in the market. For most of us, we're participating in the labor market. We have a job, and we get a paycheck every week or every month, and we use the money in that paycheck to survive and to support ourselves and our children. Human society wasn't always this. For most of our evolution, we didn't make money. There was no such thing as being an employee. This is a new thing. But it's so ingrained in our culture and it's so ingrained in our consciousness that we just take it for granted. So as I started to explore this, I said, what does that participation really look like? What does it look like? What is our relationship to our survival and our work lives? So I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and this is just for the U.S., but I would say that these numbers pretty much reflect most of the developed world in terms of people who are countries where the majority of people are interacting with the market in the way that they do in the U.S. So this would be Europe and most of Asia, certainly Japan and Korea, urban China, Central and South America. So we're talking about most of the world. So in the U.S., the average household income is $64,000 a year. That could be a single person making $64,000, or that could be two people making $32,000 each. Not important to this whole thing because you'll see how this works out. Now, the government, when they organized these statistics, they actually did a breakdown and said, okay, the average person, how much do they make a year? And how much do they spend a year in a series of different categories? The categories being taxes, housing, transportation, food, insurance and pension, healthcare, clothes, entertainment, cash contributions, and other. And when they break these down, they break them down like, for instance, income $64,000, that's the average person. The average person who makes $64,000 spends $17,000 a year on housing. Okay, you got your $64,000, your $17,000. This is how they organize them, just with these numbers. I didn't really find those numbers helpful, though. And I said, if I really want to understand the nature of this relationship, I really want to understand it and frame it in terms of actual labor. So what I did is I went through all of these categories, and I figured out what is the percentage of the total income that each of these things represents. For instance, transportation, $9,000. That's 17% of $64,000. Got it? And then what I did was I said, if a person works 40 hours a week, how many hours are they working to pay for each one of these things? And I was pretty shocked. So check this out. The average person makes, or the average household takes in $64,000. Now, that's working a 40-hour work week. Taxes, just taxes, 8 hours. 8 of that 40-hour work week. So if it's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, which most people work, one whole day of your work day, you spend working just to pay taxes. That's it. Just taxes. Housing, 11 hours. Transportation, 5 hours. Food, 4 hours. Now, housing is housing and all of the bills for your house. Transportation would include car note, your car payment, your insurance payment, gas, repairs, etc. And so, housing, 11 hours. Transportation, 5 hours. food, 4 hours, insurance and pensions, which is basically your Social Security insurance and if you have a retirement account, 4 hours. Now here's the thing. Housing, transportation, food, and insurance and pensions together add up to a very neat and tidy 24 hours, which is 3 days. So taxes, 1 day. Housing, transportation, food, insurance, and pensions, 3 days. 4 out of your 5 days. And these are all the necessities. Your housing, obviously, a roof over your head. Transportation, well, you can't get to work. Most of your transportation is getting to work and home, is it not? Your food, you gotta eat. And insurance and pensions, that's just take it out automatically. Plus you add in the taxes, 4 out of 5 days. And what's the rest? Clothes, 1 hour. Entertainment, 2 hours. Cash contributions, any charity and whatnot, 1 hour. And other, 2 hours. So that's another, oh, and healthcare, 2 hours. So if you take healthcare, clothes, entertainment, cash contributions, and other, the things that we say, oh, well, this is my disposable income, 8 hours. Just 1 day. So I want you to imagine first, how much different would your life look if you didn't have to pay for housing, transportation, or food? That's 11, 5, and 4. That's 20 hours. That's half of your workday, of your work week. Like, how much less would you work? And then the taxes, that would take it up to 28 hours. But what I also want you to consider is this. That means that as it stands, 80% of the total labor of all the people is spent just on the necessities and giving money to the government. It's spent on things that you can't get around. We only have 20% wiggle room. And that's probably the reason why. How could there be savings? They're always talking about Americans don't save, Americans have no savings. What would you save? What would you save? Americans can't pay down their debts. Where do you pull it out of? That disposable income is 2 hours worth of work out of your 40-hour work week. Where do you pull that difference from? So what we have coming is we have a revolution in automation. And that revolution in automation, everything that can be automated, I have a feeling the first industry to feel it, and I keep saying this, the first industry to feel it, and I think they're going to start feeling it as early as next year, 2017, because every Tesla model that comes out in 2017, even the base model, the new one they're introducing, that's $35,000, will have autopilot in it. A driver will still need to sit there, but it will be able to pilot itself. It'll be able to drive you to work. And I believe that's going to open a lot of people's eyes as to what is coming and what is the possibilities. And I think it's going to accelerate this whole thing. So as early as next year, 2017, the transportation industry is going to start to feel a loss of jobs. That's 5 million jobs in the US. And you say, okay, Vin, that's 5 million jobs. But I want you to think about this. Whenever you think about an industry that automation is taking over, you have to think of the ancillary industries. Because it makes more sense, and Tesla is already doing this, and because you have a computer that can monitor usage much better than a human being can, and if it's autonomous, it can go and plug itself in, we're likely to have electric cars. Now, here in Vegas, I had met someone and they invited me to come and check out the Convenience Store Association conference at the convention center in Las Vegas. And it was massive. I was shocked, but then I realized, wow, there's companies that specialize, that are the ones who install these pumps. There's companies that are the ones who build the tanks that sit under the ground that get filled with gasoline. There are companies that do the signs that change the electronic signs that change the cost of each gallon of gas. There are companies that do the awnings, the shade awnings over the pumps. There are companies that are suppliers for the inside convenience store, for the AM/PM or the 7-Eleven or the Valero or whatever it is. Like, if people aren't driving and aren't stopping at gas stations, what happens to 7-Eleven's revenues? What happens to the revenues of Red Bull? What happens to, the supplier of the coffee that 7-Eleven uses? Like, think about that. In the transportation industry, how many of these companies are already at a point where their profits are such that if they were to take a 25% drop, that they would go bankrupt? And then think about how many ancillary companies are next to them. And think about these particular workers. Where do they go? Where do you go? If you've spent the last 15 years as an engineer of gasoline holding tanks, and now there's no more gasoline holding tanks being bought, where do you go? So that presents some opportunity. While the structure is still here, and that's the key. That's an important thing. I want to get into this before I move forward with my own personal moves, because I want to give you the justification for making moves now, for implementing some things now. If you do it now, all of your infrastructure is there and you've got some cushion. And that if you are that guy, that you can put some things in motion so that before you're irrelevant, that you can say, hey, I'm going to retire from doing this. So I'll present my actual concrete plans in the next video. But I do want to present this concept. And the concept is this. And this has rang true in so many ways in my life. I've been notoriously good at predicting upcoming trends, whether that's in music, whether that's in business, whether that's in technology. I've benefited greatly in my life. Those of you who know me from being on the show Gigolos and who know me as one of the world's premier and probably the most famous male escort in the world, then I will tell you that the reason I'm in that situation is because I ran across a very early seduction community, group of pickup artists who were talking about seduction in a very scientific and rational, structured way, and started to learn it because I said, oh, there's so much value in this. I didn't know that it would take me down this path, and that that knowledge would truly allow me to have really a fantasy life, I mean, I've been stopped in foreign countries by people who don't even speak English, but the show is on in that country and had to have somebody translate. And they stopped me, got the person to translate, and men who have said, I just wish I could do what you're doing. It's my dream job. Your life is my dream. But the only reason that I have that position, the only reason that I'm in the place that I am, is because I said, you know what? This bit of information, this knowledge, this expertise, and this practice is going to be valuable to me. Hell, being able to have great relationships, knowing what you're doing in a relationship from start to finish, from meeting someone to being in a long-term relationship, to even how to properly and nicely end a relationship, a romantic relationship, so that you could stay friends, that's valuable if you never make any money. And I think that that's the way that you've got to frame your solutions. What path can you go down? And what education and training and understanding can you give yourself that will benefit you, even if this same scenario that we're in right now finds a way to eke itself out for the next 25 years without the shift coming? What will benefit you? And just having that knowledge, who knows what's going to come out of it? A phrase that I often use is, you can't be broke with a pocket full of diamonds. Each new skill, each new piece of understanding that you give to yourself is a diamond. Fill your pockets. Fill your pockets with value. Fill your mind with knowledge, and you're going to fill your heart with confidence. I'm going to get into what my particular diamonds are in the very next video. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to discuss this, I'd love to. This is a conversation. You could do that at facebook.com/VinArmani, and I can't wait to hear from you.